Hey, New Hope family, it's Pastor Matt with your devotional thought for today. In Hebrews chapter 10, we see the following words written. But recall the former days, when after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. Prior to the section I just read, it talks about what awaits those who reject Christ, and the idea that nothing awaits them except a fearful judgment, a fearful condemnation for what they've done in the body. And that's when he gets into this portion that talks about the endurance we will need, and specifically about the things that those who are reading this letter actually experienced in their lives. And if they didn't experience them directly, they partnered in gospel ministry with those who had. And what kind of things did they experience? Well, he tells us, but recall the former days when, after you were enlightened, you endured a hard struggle with sufferings, sometimes being publicly exposed to reproach and affliction, and sometimes being partners with those so treated. They aren't the only ones that have had to endure such hardship. We have brothers and sisters around the world enduring hardships, the likes of which none of us have ever seen in our eyes, with our own eyes, and ever experienced against us to the degree in which they're experiencing them, and to the degree in which these people experienced them at that time. But even the greatest extent of suffering, however, whatever kind of hardships, however severe they might be, that people might face, it's not even worth comparing to that which is stored up for us, the full assurance that we have of the salvation that awaits us, which is why he continues on and says, for you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and an abiding one. So because of this perspective, they knew that the possessions of this life, the things of this life, even the hardships of this life, are not worth comparing to what awaits all of us in Christ. And that's the full assurance we have in Christ. This will be realized. The future glory, the future hope that awaits us is as good as done because it has been done by Christ. When he makes a promise, he will fulfill it just as he says. And so the people that he's writing to here have endured hardship and suffering because they understood. They had the right perspective, an eternal perspective. They knew this life is such a small window of time, and eternity with Christ is eternity. It goes on forever and ever. So it's not worth even comparing the hardships we face now with the future that awaits us. And that's what he's saying. They were willing to endure these things, go through these hardships, experiencing agony in this life because they knew they had a better possession, even being willing to have their property plundered, having their belongings that are rightfully theirs stripped away from them, because what really awaits them is a better inheritance, a better dwelling, and a place where none of that has any value. What has value is Christ and Christ alone, and it's a greater possession that we have in him and with him. And then he continues on and says, therefore do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. We, because of God's great grace, are co-heirs with Christ. Therefore we must endure. We have need of endurance, as the author writes here, because we know that there's going to be hardship in this life, but with the proper perspective, with a recognition of what awaits us as we walk in the will of our God by giving our lives for him, in response to him giving his life for us, in response to our God sending his son to give his life for us, we now give our lives in service to him and for his purposes. Then we will inherit what is promised to us.